Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating story. It's about a company taking an incredibly unconventional path to global expansion.
Mm.
Imagine a business that started by kind of adapting a U.S. model for the Indian market, and now it's actually reverse exporting that very concept back to the U.S.
Yeah, it's quite the turnaround.
We're talking about Zaggle, an Indian spend management platform that's really making waves.
Precisely. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore Zaggle's unique strategy for entering the, let's face it, highly competitive U.S. market.
Right.
We need to dissect the challenges and opportunities they face, both at home and abroad, and ultimately understand what this tells us about global business expansion and innovation today.
And you've shared some really insightful sources with us. We're going to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you, the listener.
Okay, let's dive right in.
So building on that, let's peel back the first layer. What exactly is Zaggle, and what core problem are they solving for businesses day to day?
Well, fundamentally, it's described as a 15-year-old full-stack spend management platform.
Okay, full stack. What does that mean here?
It means they cover a lot of ground. Think employee reimbursements, corporate rewards, even handling vendor invoicing. It's all sort of integrated.
All under one digital roof, essentially.
Pretty much. And they're not a small player in India. The sources say over 3,400 clients.
Wow. Any big names?
Oh, yeah. PepsiCo, ITC, Tata Power, Wipro. Major corporations are using them.
That's significant. And the growth figures look pretty impressive, too.
They really do. They've apparently tripled revenue between FY22 and FY25. We're talking Rs 1,303 crore, which is over 150 million US dollars.
Tripled revenue.
And doubled profit in FY25 to Rs 88 crore, about $10 million USD. Plus, they went public in September 2023.
Right. I saw that. Market cap over Rs 5,500 crore. That's around $645 million.
Yeah, and the stock hit an all-time high back in December, so definite momentum.
That is significant growth. But, okay, here's what I find fascinating. Why are these companies, especially the big established ones, choosing Zaggle?
I mean, why outsource spend management when many must have their own finance teams, their own established systems?
That's an excellent question. And it really gets to the heart of Zaggle's pitch. The sources point to a clear win-win idea.
Okay.
They claim you can outsource this stuff for a fraction of the cost of an employee working 8 hours daily, 20 days a month.
A fraction of the cost, okay.
And especially when you compare it to the big legacy ERP systems, enterprise resource planning like SAP and Oracle.
Right, the giants.
Zaggle is described literally as dirt cheap.
Dirt cheap. How cheap are we talking?
Well, the annual cost for older SAP versions, with training, maintenance, all that, it can run Rs 1520 crore. That's roughly $1.8 to $2.4 million US.
Okay, that's substantial.
Zaggle, meanwhile, apparently onboards clients at 1/8 the cost. And even SAP's latest cloud software, S/4HANA, that's quoted as being nearly 20 times more expensive than Zaggle. Wow. Okay, so it's a huge cost advantage, clearly. But if these large companies already have SAP or Oracle installed, how does Zaggle fit in? Doesn't it just add another layer, more complexity?
That's the crucial point. Zaggle's niche is key here. The sources say it's a system of engagement, not of record.
Engagement, not record, meaning?
It works alongside the big ERPs.
Yeah.
It doesn't aim to replace them entirely. Think of it like a flexible layer on top.
Okay, like an add-on?
Sort of. For example, maybe SAP can't directly integrate with certain banks for, say, petty cash transactions easily. Zaggle can handle that, and then the data flows into SAP.
Ah, I see. It fills the gaps.
Precisely. But it does raise that important question you hinted at. How do they convince companies to adopt one more system, given the usual internal resistance to change, the hassle of maybe more audit trails?
Yeah, that's always a hurdle. They must be delivering some serious efficiency or cost savings to overcome that inertia.
Absolutely. Which leads us to the next really interesting piece, their U.S. market strategy.
Right. This is where it gets really unconventional. They want to enter the U.S. market by 2026, but they're not doing it the typical way.
No boots on the ground initially, not spending millions setting up shop right away.
Exactly. Instead, they're gathering all this critical intel, like where to set up, who to hire, what products work, all from back in Hyderabad, India. How on earth are they pulling this off?
This is where it gets clever. It's about redefining due diligence, really, their strategy. They're tapping into 3 PE and VC funds, private equity and venture capital.
How? By partnering with them.
by becoming a limited partner. Essentially, they're investing money into these funds.
So they're putting skin in the game. How much are we talking?
Between $500,000 to $1 million in each of the three funds.
Okay, so not insignificant. What does that buy them?
It buys them access, a seat at the table, basically. These funds, combined, have connections to over 100 B2B SaaS firms.
Software as a service firms?
Yeah, and many of them are focused specifically on that India-US corridor. So Zaggle gets this strategic proximity, as their founder Reimagining calls it.
Strategic proximity. I like that.
It gives them a huge head start. They can talk to potential partners, potential customers, gather real market data about pricing models, customer expectations, and nuances about products that work and don't.
It's like getting insider information legally.
Kind of. And Narayana added, when you put in your money, it signals that we believe in what you are building. And they are also grateful. It builds relationships.
That is genuinely a brilliant way to de-risk entry. Get the lay of the land before you commit massive resources.
Exactly. It's far cheaper than just setting up cold. And these funds are apparently chosen carefully, large enough to command influence, yet agile enough to remain hands-on.
So they're not just passive investors.
No, they're active in operations, market access, thought leadership. Zaggle gets plugged into that whole ecosystem.
And you mentioned earlier this is a kind of reverse export. What did you mean by that?
Yes, that's the fascinating twist. It's a reverse export because the spend management model itself was initially inspired by successful U.S. companies. Think Ramp and Brex.
The big U.S. fintechs in this space. They grew fast, right?
Incredibly fast. Ramp apparently hit nearly $650 million in revenue in 2024. Brex was aiming for $500 million in 2025. Yeah. And they're much younger than Zaggle.
Right, so Zaggle learned from them, adapted the model for India.
Made it work in the complex Indian market, and now they're using this super innovative investment-led strategy to bring the refined version back to the U.S. market.
It really challenges the old ideas about innovation only flowing from west to east.
Completely.
Okay, so it's clear they're ambitious, aiming to compete with those big names like Brex and Ramp. But to do that, they need scale and a broad offering. How are they building that out? You mentioned diversification.
Yeah, their approach is described as potentially mile wide and inch deep, and it involves a really aggressive acquisition strategy, especially for a mid-size Indian fintech.
Aggressive how?
Well, just in 2025 alone, they acquired or bought stakes in 4 different companies.
4 in 1 year?
Yep. Dice Enterprises and GreenEdge Enterprises in June. Then back in March, they took a 51% controlling stake in Effiasoft and over 38% in Mobileware Technologies. And before that, a 98% stake in TaxSpanner in September.
Wow. What do these companies do? Do they fit the spend management profile?
Each one either adds a new capability or expands an existing one. It's all designed to broaden their portfolio. And apparently they're not done.
More acquisitions planned.
Sources say they're screening another 8 or 9 options right now, hoping to close maybe 2 or 3 more this year.
They're really trying to build a comprehensive suite quickly. Have they launched new products internally too?
They have. Things like Zoyer, which handles vendor invoicing and payment automation, and Zadex, a spend analytics dashboard.
Okay, that's a lot of activity. Acquisitions, new products. How's this impacting the bottom line so far? Are these new ventures paying off yet?
Well, that's the thing. The sources indicate these new additions haven't really moved the revenue needle significantly yet.
Oh.
For instance, TaxSpanner's growth was described as subdued, just over RS3 core, which is, around 360,000 US.
Not huge compared to their overall revenue.
No. The expectation is that these acquisitions will start showing a real impact from fiscal year 2026 onwards. The goal is for them to eventually contribute about 15% of annual revenue.
Okay, so it's a longer-term play. But all this expansion, this ambition, it sounds like it's happening against a backdrop of some real challenges in their home market in India.
Definitely. The sources paint a picture of India being a bit of a stress test for them.
A stress test. How so?
Well, a few things. First, the market itself. India is apparently still nascent when it comes to adopting spend management. According to Zaggle's CEO and MD, educating and building confidence with CFOs takes time.
So market adoption is slower than maybe they'd like.
Seems that way. And then there's cash flow. Despite the strong revenue and profit growth we talked about, cash flow has been a consistent pain point.
Why? If revenue's growing, why is cash tight?
It seems business transactions aren't liquidating fast enough. There are delays, often related to processes with their banking partners. Money isn't cycling through quickly.
Okay. Bottlenecks in the system.
Exactly. And related to that is the whole corporate credit card situation in India.
How's that a challenge?
Well, while digital payments are being pushed hard, India actually lags way behind in corporate credit card usage. Apparently, only 2 Indian non-banks can even issue corporate credit cards.
Only 2. That's surprising compared to the U.S.
Right. In the U.S., the average person has nearly 4 credit cards. It's just a much more established system for corporate spending, too.
So that limits one of Zaggle's potential big revenue streams in India.
It's a hurdle they've had to navigate. Now, credit where it's due, their own corporate cards, which they launched in 2023 with Yes Bank, are doing well. They now account for 35–40% of revenue as of FY25.
Okay, so they found a way to make it work, contributing significantly.
Yes, and they've massively expanded their banking partnerships, quadrupled them to 16, including big public and private banks. But other friction points remain.
Like what?
Customer acquisition has actually slowed down a bit, from about 158 companies per quarter in FY24 to 110 in FY25.
Any reason why?
It seems it's harder to onboard the really large, rigid organizations that have deeply entrenched legacy systems. Change is hard for them.
Makes sense. But are the customers they're getting spending more?
Yes, that's the upside. The ticket sizes have improved. They're getting about Rs 10 lakh, roughly 12,000 US per customer per quarter now, up from maybe $7,200, $7,800 a couple of years ago.
So fewer new clients, but bigger deals.
Exactly. Quality over quantity, perhaps.
And how are investors viewing all this complexity? The growth is there, but so are the challenges.
Well, naturally, there are concerns. The sources mention questions about unstable margins and whether Zaggle can really sustain growth given the cash flow issues and the slow contribution from new offerings.
Understandable concerns.
But here's the counter-argument. This tough Indian market, this stress test, might actually be their secret weapon.
How so?
Because India's market is described as complex and horizontally structured, lots of layers, lots of hierarchy, needing real granularity of information. The thinking is, if you can handle Indian companies, then operating abroad becomes easier.
Trial by fire, essentially. If you can succeed here, you're ready for anything.
That seems to be the perspective. It forces discipline and adaptability.
Okay, so given those domestic challenges, that stress test, it makes even more sense why they're looking so eagerly at the U.S. What are the specific greener pastures they see there?
Well, a big one goes back to the credit card issue we discussed.
Right.
In the U.S., issuing credit cards is potentially much easier. You can often contract directly with networks like Visa, MasterCard, or Discover. You might not even need to rely as heavily on banks for issuance.
Ah, so that could directly address those cash flow delays they face in India when onboarding big clients.
Potentially, yes. It could smooth out that process significantly. And beyond that, the U.S. is just seen as a mature market.
A mature meaning?
More established processes, and critically, a higher openness to adapt to changes quickly. Companies might be quicker to adopt a new solution like Zaggle's.
So faster adoption, easier credit mechanisms. Sounds promising. But again, the U.S. market already has rampant bricks, those entrenched, fast-growing competitors. It's not exactly an open field.
Absolutely not. The sources acknowledge that while the market is mature, the competition is tougher there. No question about it.
So how does Zaggle genuinely expect to compete? What's their edge beyond having survived the Indian stress test?
Their confidence seems rooted in the belief that spend management itself is still evolving. They draw a parallel to how ERP and CRM systems were adopted in India.
Okay.
The CEO, Avinash Gadkindi, essentially says, look, people didn't understand ERPs or CRMs at first either, but now they're standard. He believes 10 years from now, we won't have to explain spend management either.
So they're playing the long game, betting on market evolution and their ability to carve out a space.
It seems so. Which really brings us to the core question for you, the listener, to think about.
Yeah.
Can Zaggle truly leverage that intense stress test they endured in India?
Right.
Can that experience navigating slow adoption, complex integrations, cash flow hurdles actually become a competitive advantage against rivals like rampant Brex in the hyper-competitive U.S. market?
It's a fascinating strategic gamble. So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? Zaggle's story is, well, it's a really compelling look at how companies are rethinking global expansion. They're using innovative methods like these strategic partnerships through PVC funds instead of just the traditional, often very costly, direct market entry.
Yeah, we've seen how they're rapidly diversifying, even with acquisitions not fully paying off yet, how they're battling those cash flow issues in India.
Well, simultaneously making this big bet on the U.S. market, effectively reverse exporting a model they once borrowed. It's quite a narrative.
It absolutely is. And this deep dive, I think, really shows that growth isn't always a straight line. Sometimes that path less traveled, like Zaggle's investment-first approach to the U.S., can actually be the most strategic move.
It definitely challenges standard assumptions about scaling globally.
It does. And here's a final thought to consider. If a company can successfully turn a domestic stress test, like the one Zaggle faced in India, into an unexpected advantage for international competition,
Yeah.
what does that really tell us about the value of navigating complexity, even if it feels slow or difficult at the time? It suggests that the resilience and the adaptability you forge in those tough environments might just be your most powerful asset when you decide to compete anywhere else in the world.